In today's video, I'm going to be ranking who I think are the top 10 centers right now in the NBA. So what I've planned to do on the channel is at the end of the season, right after the NBA Finals, I'm going to release a big series where I rank the top 10 from each position. But right now, I do want to do the centers just to see right now how it's going to change by the end of the season, and also just to give you guys my list right now because I really think the center position has become really interesting this season. I think there's a lot of good centers in the NBA right now. A lot of them have great defensive impacts, and overall it's an interesting list, so I want to do it today just to see how it is right now, and also compared to my list at the end of the season to see how the playoffs go and how that changes things. So before we get started, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new videos, and so that we can continue the road to 1K subscribers for my channel. So with that being said, let's get started with the list now. So first off, I've got some honorable mentions here who just missed out on the top 10. I've got Jonas Valanciunas, Miles Turner, Jusuf Nurkic, Jarrett Allen, and Chris Boucher. I'm not going to spend too much time on these guys here, but for Boucher, Allen, and Nurkic, basically their offensive production just isn't as good as the guys that I have on the list. And for Boucher specifically, he has to get a little bit stronger first and develop a little bit better defense before he can get on the list. But all three of these guys having very good seasons, especially Allen and Boucher pretty much breaking out. I'll look at Miles Turner as a guy who just missed out on the list and is having a very good season on the defensive end of the floor, maybe being a top candidate for the Defensive Player of the Year. But for me, he needs to polish up his offensive game a little bit more, specifically his scoring, for him to get into the top 10. And then for Jonas Valanciunas, I actually originally had JV in my top 10, and you'll see why in a second, but he's having a really underrated season this year and has basically been consistently the second best player on a team that's contending for a playoff spot right now. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been out the whole season, and JV stepped up and had a career year. On the defensive end of the floor, his rim protection and overall impact down low in the paint has been insane. He's been one of the better rebounders in the NBA, and on offense, he's doing what he always does, and he's having a career year when it comes to scoring, and has started to shoot the three a little bit as well. But I do have to leave him just off of the list, and it's a tough call, but he basically comes in at 11 on this list. So starting off the top 10 now at number 10, I've got Deandre Ayton of the Phoenix Suns. I think Ayton's play this season has been really unnoticed and underrated, and it's one of the big reasons why the Suns are doing so well this season. All the attention goes to Chris Paul and also Devin Booker right away, but especially defensively, Ayton has really been a big factor for this team, and on defense he does great things like protect the rim at an elite level, he defends the pick and roll very well, and he's also very good on rotations and off-ball help. Overall, he's one of the better big men defenders in the NBA from what I've seen this season, and again, it's a big factor towards the Phoenix Suns' success this year. And on the offensive end of the floor, he's done exactly what the Suns want him to do, averaging 15 and 10 this season on 63% shooting, exactly what you want from a good old traditional big man like Ayton. He's still a young, talented player that's still developing, and for this season specifically, he's played his role exactly the way that the Suns want him to, and because of this, for me, it gets him just on the list. At number 9, I've got Clint Capela from the Hawks, and Capela could really be anywhere from 9 to 6 on this list. He's actually been the main reason this season, at least for me, why the Hawks are doing so well, and on the defensive end of the floor, he's having a career year, and his impact is really helping this Hawks team, especially because without him, they really have one of the worst defenses in the NBA. But he's come in this season and provided a lot of elite rim protection for this team, and is leading the league in rebounds with 14 a game. He's basically playing his role perfectly as a traditional big man, just like I mentioned with Ayton and what he's doing this season. The only thing that Capela can do to get higher on this list is take his offensive game to the next level. Right now, he's one of the leaders in the NBA in field goal percentage, but it's obviously because of his play style, a lot similar to Ayton, basically just cleaning up the glass and getting a lot of buckets around the rim. I think Capela can get a little bit more involved offensively, maybe develop even just the slightest little jump shot, and become a little bit of a better playmaker and passer as well. He's averaging less than 1 assist this season because of his lack of versatility on the offensive end of the floor. I kept him a little bit lower on the list, but he definitely has to make the list because of his rebounding and his defensive impact. At number 8, I've got Kristaps Porzingis for the Mavericks. I've always considered Kristaps a power forward, and that's originally why I had Jonas Valanciunas off the list, but I did decide to put Kristaps as a center since this season that's basically what he's been playing all season. So for this year, Kristaps has been a little bit disappointing just because he hasn't been been that superstar second option that the Mavericks really need him to be if they want to contend for a championship, but he's still averaging 20 points with his very unique play style as well, shooting lots of threes, about 6.5 threes per game on 36% three-point shooting, which obviously as a 7'3" center is very unique and elite, and because of his offensive skill set and how unique and dominant at times it can be, I'm putting him this high on the list. Defensively, he's still really good, basically average for his position, I'd say. Obviously not the same impact defensively as guys like Capela and Ayton, but because of his overall and very creative offensive skill set and how it can be really dominant sometimes, I'm giving him a top 8 spot on the list. At number 7 on the list, I've got Christian Wood from the Rockets. Christian Wood has had an insane impact on the Rockets this season, and it's because of how good he is in the pick and roll. One of the best rollers to the basket in the NBA, does a great job with John Wall in the pick and roll, scoring there around the rim, and he's also one of the best bully ball players in the NBA, and you absolutely would not think that by looking at his frame, but if you watch Christian Wood play, you'll see how many buckets he gets down low playing bully ball, and as I mentioned, also in the pick and roll. He's averaging 23 points per game this season with 10 rebounds on very good efficiency, and is also adding a pretty consistent three-point shot to his game, and overall on this list is probably a top 5 scorer. Because of some doubts with his defensive game and how he's not a very overall aware off-ball defender yet, I can't put him in the top 10 yet, but his defensive game is still developing. He's a pretty good on-ball defender, can defend in the post pretty well, and we also have to remember that this season when he's not playing for the Rockets and when he was injured, they are 4-19 this season when Wood is out of the lineup, and when he's in the lineup, they're basically contending for a playoff spot. So his impact this season has been insane on this team, and because of his overall offensive game, I'm putting him 7th on the list. At number 6 on the list, I've got Nikola Vucevic. He recently got traded to the Chicago Bulls and has really been consistently keeping up his play on the offensive end of the floor there as well, and is having a career season this year on the offensive end of the floor. He's averaging 24 points per game, and the go-to play when you have Vucevic on your team is the pick and pop. And when he's shooting the 3 in the pick and pop this season, he's absolutely lethal from there, and overall is shooting over 40% from 3 this season, which as a big man, as we know, is absolutely insane. He's also a very good rebounder, averaging 11 rebounds per game this season, and also 4 assists per game, which is very impressive as well for a big man. If this list was only based off of offense, Vucevic would for sure be number 4 on this list, but his defensive game isn't that complete yet, and because of it, it does drop him to 6 on this list, since you definitely need to be a good defender as a big man, but he was an all-star this season, and because of his overall offensive game, especially his shooting along with his playmaking, I'm definitely putting him 6 on the list here at least. Starting off the top 5 now, at number 5, I've got Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz, and the main reason the Jazz have been doing so well this season is really because of Gobert and his impact on the defensive end of the floor, and right now he's still my favorite for the defensive player of the year, and is probably the best overall defender in the NBA. I've said it countless times on the channel, and I'll say it again, playing the Jazz when they're playing defense is basically like playing 5-on-6, because not only is Rudy Gobert the best rim protector in the NBA, but he can defend the pick and roll so well and do things like contest floaters when the guard is driving in the pick and roll, and overall just stay with both guys in the pick and roll. Even if the guard gets beat off of that screen, he can basically defend the pick and roll 2 guys at once, no problem. This is like playing 5-on-6. Rudy Gobert, especially when you're trying to run the pick and roll, basically has the impact of 2 defenders out there on the court, and obviously his rebounding is one of the best in the league, and as I mentioned, he's pretty much the best rim protector in the NBA. Does a fantastic job of blocking shots and contesting shots around the rim, pretty much better than anyone else in the NBA, and because of his defensive impact, he definitely has to be in the top 5. Obviously, the reason I can't rank him higher is because of his scoring, and how he really doesn't do anything except clean up the glass down there and get a few rim grazers a game, but he does have a pretty good offensive impact as well, doing things like setting a lot of screens for the Utah Jazz on the offensive end of the floor. So the combination of his little offensive impact here and pretty much being the best defender in the NBA, at least for me, puts him top 5 on the list for sure. So now kicking off the top 4, and this is where the list gets really interesting, and we have basically 2 separate extremely close player comparisons between Karl Anthony Towns and Bam Adebayo, which I'll probably end up making a whole separate video on that player comparison specifically, and also the Nikola Jokic versus Joel Embiid comparison. If you guys watch my channel, you already know that I already made an entire video looking at that comparison and fully analyzing it. So for the Cat versus Bam, I am putting Karl Anthony Towns 4th, and Bam Adebayo third, and it's really just because of the defensive gap and how Karl-Anthony Towns is pretty much one of the worst big man defenders in the NBA, and Bam Adebayo is one of the best. And what really stands out for Bam for me is how he's so versatile on the defensive end of the floor that not only is he one of the best rim protectors and post defenders in the NBA, but he can literally defend anyone on the court. I watched the Miami Heat's last game against the Brooklyn Nets, and there were times where Bam was switched on to Kyrie Irving, one of the most potent guards in the NBA when it comes to scoring, and Bam did a fine job against him and held his own against Kyrie and stopped him from scoring many times. And the fact that Bam is so versatile on the defensive end of the floor, can basically do anything at an elite level defensively, makes him easily a top 5 defender in the NBA for me. And obviously this doesn't compare to Karl-Anthony Towns. It's an extremely close comparison, since Towns is one of the best offensive centers in the NBA and is one of the best scoring centers in the NBA, averaging around 25 points this season, also on extreme efficiency from 3, but because of the really big gap defensively, I give a very slight edge to Bam Adebayo. They're also very good playmakers for centers, but as I mentioned, just because of the gap defensively compared to the gap offensively, and how it's not like Cat is that much better of an offensive player than Bam, at least in my opinion, because of how they can both pretty much score the ball at a high level. Cat a little bit higher, but Bam a little bit less, and they're both pretty good playmakers. Cat's a little bit better offensively, but because of the defensive gap and how good of a defender Bam is, I'm giving the third spot to him. So on my list here, I've got Karl-Anthony Towns at 4 and Bam Adebayo at 3. And for the last 2 spots here, we've got the Jokic versus Embiid comparison. And I've got a bit of a hot take here. I'm putting Nikola Jokic 2 and Joel Embiid 1. I'm not going to go that in depth on this one since I already made an entire video on it. So if you want to see the in-depth analysis of me analyzing the Jokic versus Embiid comparison, definitely be sure to check that out on my channel. But basically, offensively, they're pretty much equal when it comes to scoring. Jokic is obviously the much better playmaker, so I give a slight edge to him on the offensive end of the floor, but kind of the same thing with the Cat versus Bam comparison. Embiid is a lot better defensively, and when it comes to this debate, it really depends what you value more between overall defense and playmaking, and how good of a playmaker you really think Jokic is. And personally, I think he's the very best playmaker in the NBA, but because of the defensive gap and how much of a better defender Embiid is than Jokic, I give a slight edge to Embiid. So the last 4 on my list here, I have Karl-Anthony Towns at 4, Bam Adebayo at 3, Nikola Jokic at 2, or should we call it 1B, and then Joel Embiid as the best center in the NBA right now. So there you have it. That is the end of today's video, and those are my top 10 centers right now in the NBA as of April 20th of 2021. That's when I'm recording this video, and it's going to be really interesting to see at the end of the season how this list compares to the end of the season one. As I mentioned, I'm definitely going to be doing that big series at the end of the season, ranking the top 10 from each position, and then a big top 50 list as well. So it's going to be really interesting to compare the 2 lists to see how it's changed, and overall just to see how the season played out. As for this video, if you're new to the channel, as I mentioned, be sure to subscribe so we can really get on that road to 1K. Comment down below what you think of my list and what you would change. Just remember that, of course, we all have different opinions on these topics, so just remember to respect everyone's opinion that's involved. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next video.